So, welcome, Nicolle. I should say that Nicolle and I filmed that 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I thought we might have sort of 15 minutes to grab a bit of content. And I was so excited and delighted when Nicolle not only sat and chatted for an hour and a half chewing the cud, and then set up a couple of weeks later a demo of the platform. And the platform is kind of amazing, I have to say. It's a pretty great job. So, welcome. It's not your first Beet Retreat.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, and always a pleasure. Let's start with the big question. We're closing in on the end of 2022. We've just had a huge political season. Give us your sense of where Addressable is. Where are we at the end of 2022?
So at the end of 2022, we're farther along than we were at the end of 21 and 20. If anybody's seen me speak anywhere, watched the video, I'm a big believer in evolution versus revolution. In other words, headlines matter very little to me because I think the work is really done in the trenches between brands and suppliers and everybody in the middle, which all of us play a part. And so I think we're making a lot of progress. Like on the addressable side of our business, which is just a piece of what we do, the business has been growing multiple folds over the last 4+ years. That has continued this year, so that is good. The business is moving forward. It is not moving forward probably at the pace that it could or should, based on the supply that's entered the market, not just from last year, but the last multiples of years. I think the money has not followed the eyeballs in addressable as it could or should. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that we're also still aggregating a lot of the audience data from a first-party perspective for brands. Agencies are standing up technologies. Companies like ours are aggregating data sets to match in a privacy-compliant way in a privacy-moving world. We just talked about that yesterday. So there's a lot of moving parts. I think sometimes we beat ourselves up like, we're not making progress on everything's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Let's just get that out there. So I think, but what we are doing is I think we're making a lot of progress on the bookends. Bookends and addressable, in my opinion, and generally in advanced TV are creating data sets that match in a privacy compliant way on the front end. That's one side of the bookend. And then being able to provide privacy compliant measurement that can either sit by itself as an individual supplier like Ampersand. I'm staring at Lisa, so like a Disney, and then also the capability to bring those data sets again in a privacy compliant way somewhere else, so that they could be collectively used for purposes of the brands and the agency. So we're making a lot of progress, but there's going to be more progress in 2023, of course.
And just briefly, that data enablement piece, that question about privacy, it came up yesterday. Where is that at this point in time? I think Travis Scholes, who was on our panel yesterday, said clean room infrastructure is still pretty nascent, but developing rapidly. I think it's a bit more advanced in terms of your use of data across the ecosystem. Can you give us a sense of where you're at with the data enablement of your infrastructure and inventory?
Sure. Well, again, 4 years ago, we started with 0. We're at 42 million households of data, so that's pretty scaled pretty quickly. And a lot of the work that we are doing with brands and agencies are doing that, privacy compliant data matching through third-party companies. There's differences in the fidelity of that data set. So you lose data when you do that. I think that's getting better over the last several years as well. But clean rooms are going to play a part, in a lot of what we're doing. Again, we're just building this stuff out in the last couple of years, and a lot of what we're doing, I think, with the most advanced agencies and brands directly is, well, first, brands that have first-party data are very reticent to even give that to their agencies. So then there's figuring the dynamic between brand, agency, and companies like Ampersand or any supplier of media. So that's one. Which we're figuring out ways around it, where agencies involved, the first party matches directly. So there's ways to work that out, but that takes time to work out those data sets. And then I think secondarily is figuring out new use cases. So addressable, for example, when we started with addressable, it was take your audience and run it addressably. Now addressable increasingly, and there's a lot of drumbeat in the market, which I think is good, is addressability when used well, is not just about targeting the same audience, but also incrementality in advanced television, right? So how do you find the same audience? Because we know there's frequency issues. We talked about that yesterday. It's not just in streaming, it's everywhere. We talk about frequency in streaming, but it's actually everywhere. If you look at the data, we can aggregate for a brand 100% of what they're doing because of the data that we sit on. There's frequency issues everywhere. So we have a lot of work to do as an industry, I think, on that. But incrementality is a great use of addressability, and I think a lot of what we're doing in addressable is around that as well. And we're not the only ones, but because of our scale, we're a big player in that space too.
And I think you made the point, and I couldn't agree a bit more, that data enablement, we beat ourselves up about it a lot, but the level of progress is extraordinary. I mean, there is a fundamental transformation of TV taking place driven by data, which in the course of this decade is going to deliver huge dividends for buyers and sellers. But let's talk about definitions. So we've made a bit of a mess of TV, it seems to me. We've got MVPDs, fast, linear addressable, data-driven linear. We've got CTV and streaming, which are sometimes the same thing and sometimes slightly different. We've got premium video, digital video. Where does addressable fit into this? And I guess the bigger question, do we need to redefine TV?
Well, everything you just mentioned is TV.
100%.
And I think there's basically two flavors so there's ad-supported and non-ad-supported. So everybody in this room, like, depending on what you're doing, is probably more focused on the ad-supported part. Okay, so fine. So let's take that sliver of total television as opposed to subscription non-ad-supported. If you sit just on the ad-supported part, then I think whether it is, traditional linear television, linear addressable, VOD, streaming, who cares, really? As long as I think the definition of television is it premium content, period, end of story. Premium content should be a different definition of television than UGC, kind of, I'm going to be cheeky and say cat videos, right? Like, that's not the same. Not all video is the same. There's premium video and not premium video. And if you ask for the definition, it's like, it when you see it. It's that nomenclature. So I think if you talk about television, it's premium content. And then the differentiator might be, is it live, like a sports event versus, kind of on-demand content.
I mean, my sense is there is an evolving debate about the definition of quality and premium. I think Barb in the UK has a debate, but it's a debate which is very clearly geared towards a certain outcome.
Yeah.
Here, I think buyers and sellers just aren't yet on the same page. You sort of see it in those discussions about quality versus attention to some extent.
Yeah.
But we'll get there, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think it also, of course, it depends on where you sit that you'd want the definition to look, a certain way or not. But I think at the end of the day, the brands are going to decide their definition of what matters. Because for certain brands, frankly, like, all video might be okay, but there will be different, because premium content does have a different price point to run those businesses. I mean, we're talking about all the streaming providers and sort of like, it costs money to create this content. If you want to be next to it, it's not going to be the same as like my 11-year-old that, posts a video of our dog on YouTube. It's not this, it is not the same type of video that we're
And I guess the
about.
buyers will always maintain that quality is in the eye of the beholder, and some brands want to pay for placement against quality. For others, they have different priorities. And
That's right. And that's why there's a choice. And some brands just might not choose to do that. And that's okay too. But I don't think that should redefine the definition, is my point. Like, there is a difference between premium video and non-premium video. Whether or not you want to buy it is a different discussion, in my opinion.
There's probably definitions at either end we can agree on, but a fuzzy bit in the middle. But let's talk about satellite then. So you work with lots of cable players, and there's fantastic signs of collaboration across the kind of cable ecosystem. Do the cable and satellite players, I think we've got all the satellite folks in the room today, do they need to work more closely? I mean, do you spend enough time with Kevin, with the DirecTV advertising people?
Just talking to Kevin this morning. So we
You spend
actually
too much
do
time.
work with that. So Ampersand has several different businesses, but historically the company was a national spot business, and we do today partner with Dish and Direct in the national spot business. So we are partners in that business. We are not currently.
As point of view, that's a seamless transaction.
Correct. Yeah. So we're basically the buy-side interface for national spot for cable, satellite, telco.
Great.
So Verizon as well. So in that marketplace, we do collaborate and we're partners. In the national space, we are not officially, meaning we are not the interface. We're the interface for Comcast, Cox, Charter, Altice, Verizon. We're not the interface for Direct and Dish. And I know JB and Kevin are here, but we're partners in the national spot marketplace. We do, in my opinion, collaborate differently, which, we had a whole session on collaboration yesterday. Collaboration can mean different things. I actually do think we are all marching, to my video, I'm very consistent when I say we're marching in the same direction. Doesn't necessarily mean we need to do it exactly together, but we're all working with agencies and brands trying to solve the same use cases. And again, to my comment yesterday, maybe it's because I was at WPP for so long, but in my opinion, brands and agencies are the tip of the spear. We all need to solve for, in a privacy compliant way, with whatever assets we have that are unique. And in this case, everybody might not win. You do have to have something unique to bring to the buy side. But those that do, and I obviously am sitting here because I think Ampersand does, we collectively need to drive our own value prop. But I think we're all doing, I think JB and Kevin and their teams and our team are all doing the same thing, which we're talking to the buy side and saying, what do you need? And again, I'll go back to the bookends. If we can all receive the audiences that the brand or the agency want to execute, and also provide the measurement on the back end for either our piece or, whatever the buy side needs to get what they need, then we're doing our part in collaboration, in my opinion. Right? I mean,
Right.
that is really, if we get the bookends right, we could work on automation in between and all that sort of stuff. But I think in the last 4 years, we're getting the bookends very, very right. All of us. I think we're all doing our part. So I think we should probably give ourselves as an industry more credit than we're probably giving ourselves. It's not perfect, but if you look back to 4 years ago, none of this stuff was here. So I think we're actually doing better than we're saying we're doing.
So next year, should the big priority be to try and build bridges between MVPD, network addressable, and CTV streaming programmatic addressable? There's a lot of talk at the moment about how it's still hard to transact seamlessly across these two pools. I think Howard's panel will touch upon it.
Yeah, so 100%. And I think the identity companies play a huge part in that. And they're making a lot of traction there too, because that's a way to bridge the two worlds for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing some thoughts with us.